The room was alive with tension, a hum of anticipation vibrating through every corner. Cameras flickered, capturing the gleam of polished surfaces and the anxious glances of those gathered. Reporters whispered, audience members shifted, and somewhere deep in the back, a microphone crackled with static, amplifying every heartbeat. This was not just another political event. Something electric lingered in the air, an unspoken promise that the status quo was about to shatter. And then she stepped forward. JasmineCrockett.com, unwavering, every inch the embodiment of dignity and resolve. Her gaze swept the room, piercing the crowd like sunlight through storm clouds. Silence descended, as if the world collectively paused to catch a single breath. And then she said it, her voice cutting through the tension with surgical precision. "You're not wanted." The words landed like a thunderclap. Ivanka Trump froze mid-smile, her composed veneer cracking ever so slightly. Eyes widened. Cameras zoomed. The audience collectively gasped, the murmurs swelling into a wave of disbelief. Social media, if the cameras could speak, would already be ablaze with snippets, hashtags, and shocked commentary. Every journalist, every viewer, every political observer instinctively knew. This was not a moment they would forget. The weight of the line was almost physical. "You're not wanted" was more than a phrase. It was a declaration of principle, a challenge to entitlement, a direct confrontation with privilege. It carried the voice of those silenced, overlooked, underestimated, of every citizen who had been told they did not belong. And in that instant, Crockett became more than a politician. She became a symbol, a hero rising in real time. Daring to speak the truth that so many had whispered behind closed doors, Ivanka's usual confidence faltered. The cameras caught a flash of uncertainty, a subtle twitch in her expression, the smallest fissure in a carefully curated image. The room held its breath. Social media was already imagining the headlines, the clips, the memes. Journalists scribbled notes feverishly, sensing the viral storm about to erupt. But this was only the opening. The tension had barely begun to crest. Behind the poised exterior, the stakes were monumental, the repercussions unpredictable. The country was watching, the audience waiting, and the world would soon learn. What happened next would leave the entire nation in disbelief. Asterisk. The confrontation had not happened in a vacuum. Weeks of political maneuvering, whispered threats, and calculated appearances had led to this very moment. The event itself, an ostensibly routine panel on policy and public service, had been billed as another ceremonial gathering. Yet beneath the polished speeches and forced smiles, a storm was brewing. Every handshake, every nod, every carefully timed glance was a chess move, and everyone in the room understood it. Ivanka Trump entered the stage with the confidence of someone born into influence, a woman accustomed to commanding attention simply by existing. She carried the aura of entitlement like armor, her every gesture designed to project control and sophistication. Too many, she embodied the establishment itself, privilege insulated from consequence, wealth wielded as a weapon, appearances polished to perfection. Her presence was a statement. Power belongs to those who are born to it, hued, and questions about legitimacy are beneath notice. Across the room, Jasmine Crockett represented something far different. She did not glide in with the same ease of birthright or social advantage. Her presence was hard-earned, tempered by struggle, forged through battles fought in courtrooms and communities. She carried with her the weight of the people's voice, the quiet fury of those systematically ignored, the lived truth of those told they did not belong. In that setting, her role was clear: to hold the powerful accountable, to remind everyone that authority must serve justice, self-interest. Asterisk, the stakes were immediate, but they were also symbolic. This was not just about one exchange, one moment of public humiliation. It was about identity, about the values America claimed to uphold versus the reality it often tolerated. The eyes of constituents, journalists, and activists were glued to every nuance, every tilt of the head, every subtle inflection. One slip could ignite a media frenzy. One perfectly placed word could become a viral rallying cry. The room was a microcosm of the nation's attention. A pressure cooker, where words would become more than speech, they would become catalysts, and the audience was watching. Not just the 200 people in attendance, but millions beyond the walls. Social media followers, news commentators, civic activists, ordinary citizens scrolling through feeds late at night, hungry for clarity, for justice, for a moment that reaffirmed their belief that courage still mattered. They understood instinctively that this clash of personalities and principles could shift perceptions, to influence narratives, and inspire action. Every raised eyebrow, every pause, every micro-expression mattered. Yet even as tension mounted, there was a subtle foreshadowing. The words about to be exchanged here would ripple across the internet, shaking reputations overnight. Every camera angle, every whispered aside, every viral clip was a thread connecting this room to the world beyond. Something fundamental was about to happen. The ordinary cadence of public appearances was about to fracture. And in the silence before the storm, everyone, Ivanka Crockett, and the audience alike, felt it. Everything changes in moments. Asterisk, Ivanka. Trump's story began in the marble-floored corridors of privilege. A world where opportunities were currency and connections were inherited. Born into wealth and power, she was groomed to move effortlessly through society's most exclusive circles. Private schools, luxury vacations, designer labels, these were the backdrop of her upbringing. A life cushioned from the consequences that defined most people's existence. Success was expected, not earned. The world bent around her, and she learned early that confidence could masquerade as competence. That charisma could override scrutiny. Her rise into politics and business mirrored this upbringing. Ivanka moved seamlessly from modeling to brand development to advisory roles in government. Each step polished to perfection, each appearance carefully curated. She projected an image of sophistication, intelligence, and influence. Yet behind the public persona lurked contradictions that even her own carefully staged photo ops could not entirely conceal. She spoke of women's empowerment while advocating policies that sometimes favored privilege over equity. She championed entrepreneurship while enjoying the protections and advantages most Americans could only imagine. Every statement, every initiative carried the tension between aspiration and entitlement, between performance and substance. Despite her meticulously managed image, moments of fragility punctuated her public life. Under pressure, cracks emerge, subtle hesitations in interviews, forced smiles when confronted with criticism, a blink too long or a pause too heavy when pressed on uncomfortable truths. These were fleeting, almost imperceptible to the casual observer, but to those attuned, they revealed the underlying reality. Confidence had limits, and entitlement could falter when challenged with accountability. The public, always hungry for spectacle, noticed these moments. Headlines chronicled missteps that ranged from gaffes in speeches to the perception of impropriety in business dealings. Social media exploded with commentary, imagined tweets mocking her overreach, memes lampooning her contradictions, hashtags that both celebrated and derided her visibility. One viral clip captured a sigh, a pause, a sideways glance, and overnight it became shorthand for a deeper critique of the privileges she embodied. Audiences dissected her every gesture, not just for entertainment, but as a mirror reflecting systemic inequities and the vulnerabilities of inherited power. Cinematic contrasts defined Ivanka's world. The glossy skyscrapers and private jets stood in stark relief against the real world she often spoke about. The neighborhoods, schools, and workplaces where everyday Americans struggled to claim dignity and opportunity. Every opulent backdrop emphasized what she had and what others had been denied. Every carefully staged event underscored the gulf between appearance and accountability, between the comfort of entitlement and the rigor of justice. And yet the audience response was not uniform. Some marveled at her poise and influence. Some envied her status. But many, especially those who understood struggle firsthand, watched with disbelief and quiet indignation. Privilege disguised as competence, one imagined tweet read, "Does she even know the world outside her tower?" Another mocked. Memes circulated, amplifying the sense of arrogance, teetering on fragility. This public scrutiny created a subtle pressure cooker, a figure celebrated for power, yet always one misstep away from exposure, one challenge away from collapse. In this context, Ivanka Trump's role as the antagonist crystallized. She was more than a public figure. She was a living embodiment of entitlement, a foil against which the heroism of someone like Jasmine Crockett would shine. Every luxury, every carefully staged smile, every misstep under pressure became part of the narrative tapestry, highlighting the contrasts that would make Crockett's eventual triumph not just possible, but profoundly satisfying. The stage was set. Privilege versus principle, performance versus authenticity, entitlement versus justice. And the audience, already attuned to the drama, could sense it. The moment of reckoning was approaching, and the cracks in the facade were only widening. Jasmine Crockett's story begins far from the marble towers and curated image of privilege. Born in the heart of Texas to a working-class family, she learned early that life demanded grit, perseverance, and an unflinching sense of justice. Her parents worked tirelessly long hours, modest paychecks, countless sacrifices to give her a foundation that no amount of money could buy: the value of integrity, the strength of resilience, and the belief that every person deserved a fair shot. From these roots, Crockett inherited a fierce commitment to the underdog, a drive to speak for those whose voices were too often ignored or silenced. School was never easy. Crockett confronted systemic inequities from a young age, navigating environments that were at times dismissive, at times openly hostile. Teachers underestimated her, peers questioned her potential, and she faced the subtle, persistent weight of societal expectations that told her she might not belong. Yet each obstacle became a crucible, shaping not only her intellect, but her moral compass. She learned to read people, to anticipate challenges, and to channel frustration into focus. Every setback became a lesson, every microaggression a sharpening stone for her resolve. The path to law was paved with financial hurdles and skepticism. College tuition, the cost of textbooks, the struggle to balance part-time jobs with demanding coursework, these were daily realities she met with tenacity. Yet Crockett's ambitions were never tempered by circumstance. She excelled academically, emerging as a voice of reason, intelligence, and empathy. Her professors took note of her analytical mind. Her peers recognized her ability to marshal arguments with precision and grace, and she quietly began to build a reputation as someone who could navigate both the courtroom and the complex moral landscapes of public service. Entering the legal profession, Crockett confronted new layers of challenge. The field was male-dominated, often dismissive of women, particularly women of color. She faced skepticism, patronizing remarks, and the constant pressure to prove that her presence was earned, not tokenized. But Crockett did more than survive, she thrived. She took on cases others overlooked, championing the rights of the marginalized, defending those whom society had already written off. In every courtroom, every negotiation, she honed her voice, refined her strategy, and cemented her reputation as a tireless advocate for justice. Her rise into public office was no accident. It was the culmination of years of steadfast commitment, the embodiment of lived experience, and the product of relentless perseverance. Crockett's story resonated because it was grounded in reality, the reality of those who struggle, those who fight, and those who refuse to be silenced. She represented hope, accountability, and the enduring belief that courage could challenge even the most entrenched power. Every struggle she endured, from racial bias to financial hardship, from professional skepticism to systemic barriers, was a preparation. An unseen rehearsal for the moment the spotlight would demand more than politeness or diplomacy. These experiences sharpened her clarity, her moral vision, and her readiness to confront arrogance with truth. When Crockett stepped into a room with the weight of expectation pressing down, she carried not just her own confidence, but the hopes of countless others who had been underestimated, dismissed, or overlooked. And it was this combination of intellect, experience, and unwavering principle that made her uniquely poised for the confrontation ahead. She did not rely on inherited wealth, connections, or curated appearances. She relied on knowledge, preparation, and an unshakable sense of justice. The very struggles that could have broken others instead forged her into someone capable of delivering not just words, but truth, clarity, and moral authority for the audience. Crockett was more than a public figure. She was a symbol of perseverance, courage, and integrity. Her story invited admiration, empathy, and emotional investment. Viewers rooted for her not because of spectacle, but because her victories represented the triumph of principle over privilege, effort over entitlement, and humanity over arrogance. And in that context, the anticipation built to a singular, electric certainty. It was these very struggles that made her ready for this exact confrontation. The audience could feel it in their bones, the tension, the stakes, and the certainty that justice, in its most human and resolute form, was about to take the stage. The room was a living pulse of anticipation. Cameras tracked every movement, capturing the tension that hung thick in the air. The audience leaned forward, eyes fixed, breaths held. This was not merely a debate. It was a collision of principles, a showdown of stature and substance, a stage set for history. Every microphone, every spotlight amplified the stakes. And the world outside was watching, waiting for the first spark. Ivanka Trump began with her signature composure. A smile that suggested control, her tone smooth, measured. But even in her careful delivery, subtle digs slipped through. "We all have our ways of contributing," she remarked, her voice silk over steel, seemingly innocuous line that carried an unmistakable undertone of superiority. "Some of us are born to lead, others to follow." The audience caught the bite beneath the polish. Cameras lingered on faces, capturing the smallest flicker of disapproval. Journalists scribbled frantically, noting the arrogance in every phrasing. The implication that influence was inherited, not earned. Crockett responded with calm precision. Her voice was steady, each word deliberate. She did not react with heat or theatrics. She measured her cadence, allowing the weight of truth to land naturally. "Leadership is not inherited," she said evenly. "It is earned through service, sacrifice, and accountability." Now, the words were simple, yet carried the gravity of 1,000 overlooked voices. The audience felt it, a shiver of validation rippling through the crowd. Cameras captured the micro-expressions. Ivanka's confident facade flickered, subtle tightening around the eyes, paused too long before the next smile. As the exchange continued, the tension escalated. Ivanka attempted to regain composure, her remarks growing sharper, a pointed edge creeping into her tone. "Some people are just not ready for responsibility," she said, a barely concealed jab. The audience murmured, a soft ripple of disapproval and surprise spreading across the room. Crockett did not flinch. Each pause, each carefully chosen word, was a counterweight to the venom beneath Ivanka's surface. "Readiness," Crockett replied, "is proven by action, not pedigree. History does not remember those who merely inherit, remembers those who stand for justice." The room hung on her every syllable. Silence followed each line, thick and heavy, as if the world had collectively exhaled, waiting for the next strike. The camera pans captured it all, the subtle shift in Ivanka's posture, the tightening grip on her notes, the barely concealed tension in her smile. Audience members exchanged glances, whispers riding the edges of polite decorum, a shared recognition that something extraordinary was unfolding. The escalation reached its peak as the dialogue sharpened into near confrontation. Every remark was a test of composure, every response a battle of principle versus performance. The contrast was clear, Ivanka's arrogance flickering under pressure. Crockett's resolve unwavering, her every word a testament to preparation, intellect, and moral clarity. The atmosphere was electric, charged with anticipation, ready to snap. Every eye in the room, every camera lens, every imagined tweet and meme waiting to be born sensed the inevitability. This clash would not end quietly, and the hero's defining moment was fast approaching. The room was electric, every camera lens zooming, every journalist holding their breath. Crockett had listened, measured, and waited. Ivanka Trump, still clinging to the remnants of her composure, had thrown subtle barbs, smug remarks, and veiled critiques. But now, the stage belonged entirely to Crockett. The silence that followed her opening words was almost tangible, a living pause that made the audience lean forward in unison, as if the very walls of the room were leaning in too. Then she spoke. Slowly, deliberately, each word cutting through the tension like a blade. Power is not inherited. Influence is not a birthright. Leadership is earned by standing for truth, not by shielding yourself in privilege. The words were simple, but the impact was immediate. Ivanka's usual polished veneer faltered. Her eyes widened slightly, lips pressing into a thin line. The audience reacted subtly at first, a quick intake of breath here. A murmured acknowledgement there, but the energy in the room shifted like a storm moving in. Cameras caught every flicker of expression, each twitch of body language, each momentary falter. Crockett paused, letting the words sink, letting the weight of history, effort, and moral authority resonate. And then she continued, layering facts, examples, and evidence into a single, unassailable arc. While some inherit wealth, I've inherited responsibility. While some inherit comfort, I've inherited the struggles of those whose voices were ignored. Every law I've fought for, every case I've taken, every life I've defended was to ensure that the powerless have a seat at the table. Each line was precise, each pause a drumbeat of inevitability. The audience leaned in closer. A journalist's pen hovered above paper, capturing not just the words, but the gravity behind them. Ivanka's posture shifted, subtle at first, then unmistakably. The arrogance that had carried her so far began to crack under the pressure. A hand pressed to her notes, a blink too long, a forced smile. The tension was cinematic, every subtle sign amplified, every movement captured for posterity. Crockett's calm clarity made the room feel smaller, more intimate.
Oh, yes.
Despite the dozens of cameras and the hundreds of witnesses, the contrast between the unshakable hero and the faltering figure of entitlement was impossible to ignore. Outside the room, the moment had already begun to take on a life of its own. Imagine tweets formed themselves in real time. Hashtag #YouReNotWanted trending within minutes. Clips circulating with captions like, "Finally, someone said it, and privilege cannot withstand truth." Memes began to spread, humor and admiration intertwining in a way that magnified the sting of the confrontation. Influencers and commentators speculated wildly, dissecting every phrase, every pause, every nuance. No one could believe she just said that done yet. She had. And the world was watching. Crockett pressed on, layering moral clarity atop factual precision. "It's easy to command a room when the world bends around you," she said, voice steady, unwavering. "It's harder to command respect when every step must be earned, when every word must reflect truth and justice, when the lives of those less fortunate are your compass, not your backdrop." The pause after this line was long, deliberate, and deafening in its significance. Cameras lingered. Audience members exchanged glances that communicated recognition, admiration, and a shared sense of witnessing history. Ivanka's composure cracked further, her smile no longer confident, her eyes betraying the internal scramble to regain footing. The counterattack culminated in a single, undeniable statement, delivered not with theatrics, but with measured authority. "You may be admired for what you inherit, but respect is commanded by what you give. And I will not stand aside for entitlement masquerading as leadership." The words struck like a gavel. The room exhaled collectively, an almost audible release of tension, as if the air itself had been holding its breath. Every camera caught the reaction, Ivanka frozen mid-gesture, a hand tightening around notes, a fleeting expression of disbelief. Every journalist felt the gravity of the moment, knowing this was the clip that would define headlines for days, perhaps weeks. Social media, real and imagined, exploded. Hashtags multiplied. Hashtag Crockett wins. Hashtag truth over privilege. Hashtag mic drop moment. Memes juxtaposed her calm authority with Ivanka's faltering smile, captions playing off the stark contrast. Commentators dissected her composure, her precision, the moral clarity of her words. Celebrities and politicians tweeted their praise. Finally, courage speaking truth to power. History will remember this moment. The ripple effect was instantaneous. Even those who had previously dismissed her underestimated power were now forced to acknowledge the impact of her presence and poised. Asterisk through it all, Crockett maintained a composed posture, her calm energy grounding the room. She did not gloat. She did not shout. She simply embodied the principle that power without accountability is hollow, that courage paired with preparation is unstoppable, and that dignity is the quiet force capable of toppling even the most entrenched arrogance. Every pause, every glance, every deliberate inflection amplified the weight of the moment as she stepped back. Letting the finality of her words settle, the audience sat in stunned silence. A shared recognition of witnessing not just a confrontation, but a declaration. Cameras captured the ripple across the room, journalists whispering to colleagues, audience members exchanging incredulous looks, Ivanka adjusting her posture as the cracks in her facade deepened. Outside, the imagined chatter, hashtags, and viral clips already cemented the moment as an inflection point. The world had seen it, and it would not forget. In that instant, the hero had triumphed. The moral clarity, the evidence, the composure, everything aligned to create a moment that would echo across media, social networks, and public discourse. The confrontation had reached its apex, the viral moment crystallized, and the stage was set for the aftermath. Asterisk, the moment had passed in real time. But the echoes of Crockett's words reverberated across the nation. Within minutes, snippets of the confrontation flooded social media feeds. Clips of her calm yet devastating delivery circulated widely, framed against Ivanka's faltering composure. Hashtags like #YouReNotWanted, #CrockettWins, and #TruthOverPrivilege began trending, climbing the charts as users shared, reposted, and commented. Every share felt like a tiny drumbeat, a collective affirmation of courage confronting entitlement. Twitter feeds lit up with a mix of shock, admiration, and humor. Finally, someone was spine. One imagined tweet read. Another joked, Ivanka's smirk just met its match. #CrockettWins. Memes juxtaposed Crocketts.com, commanding presence with Ivanka's flustered gestures. Captions emphasizing the stark contrast between principle and performance. Social media became a theater in itself, each reaction amplifying the impact of the live event. As millions participated in a conversation that felt immediate, urgent, and historic, asterisk news outlets scrambled to cover the fallout. Headlines ran in rapid succession. Jasmine Crockett delivers historic takedown of Ivanka Trump. Privilege meets its match. Crockett commands the room. The words that shook Washington, "You're not wanted." Political commentators dissected every line, debating its significance, applauding her composure, and questioning the optics for the Trump brand. Even late-night shows seized on the moment, blending analysis with satire, ensuring the confrontation reached audiences who had not been watching live. Celebrities weighed in, lending social validation and widening the conversation. Public figures praised Crockett for her courage, calling her a voice of the people and a reminder that leadership is earned, not inherited. Influential commentators highlighted the symbolic resonance. A woman of color, rising through perseverance and principle, publicly dismantling the narrative of entitlement. The applause was virtual, but felt tangible. A chorus of approval spanning generations and ideologies. Asterisk, meanwhile, public perception began to shift. Crockett emerged not just as a politician, but as a hero in real time. The applause was not only for the words spoken, but for the embodiment of integrity, for the demonstration that truth could cut through power and privilege. Ivanka, by contrast, became a symbol of arrogance under pressure, her image punctured by the momentary cracks in her composure. The room's live reaction had been telling, but the global response magnified it tenfold. Privilege without accountability, however polished, could not withstand the weight of moral clarity. Asterisk, the ripple effects extended beyond social media. Fundraisers, civic groups, and advocacy organizations cited the moment as evidence of the importance of accountability and representation. Political pundits referenced it in discussions of leadership and integrity. While educators and thought leaders framed it as a teaching moment, the demonstration that courage, preparation, and principle could confront even the most fortified structures of power. The narrative crystallized. The public rewards bravery, authenticity, and service, not inherited advantage. Even casual viewers were swept into the conversation. Families watching news recaps discussed the confrontation at dinner tables. Students debated it in classrooms. Professionals dissected it over coffee breaks. Every discussion, formal or informal, reinforced the moral lesson embedded in the spectacle. Real authority is measured not by wealth or status, but by the courage to speak truth to power. The imagined Twitter feed read like a tapestry of collective consciousness. "This is how leadership looks," one user wrote. "She made history without raising her voice," another observed. "Privilege never recovers from moral clarity," quipped a commentator. Memes proliferated, blending humor with admiration, capturing the contrast between entitlement and earned respect. The narrative became viral because it resonated with an instinctive truth. The audience craved validation for courage, and Crockett had delivered it. By the end of the evening, the shockwaves were undeniable. Politicians, journalists, and social commentators were forced to acknowledge the moment as a turning point. Crockett's moral authority had punctured a carefully curated image, leaving a lasting impression not just on those in the room, but on a nation watching, sharing, and feeling seen. The hero had triumphed, and the world had taken note. The stage was now set for reflection, for moral clarity, and for the inspirational resolution that would cement the story in public memory, asterisk, as the dust of confrontation settled. The true significance of the moment became clear. Crockett's words, calm yet devastating in their precision, were more than a rebuttal. They were a statement of principle, a moral reckoning that transcended the theater of politics. In that room, in front of cameras and thousands of witnesses, she reframed the encounter into a universal truth. Dignity triumphs over hate. Integrity outweighs privilege, and service surpasses lineage. These were not abstract ideals. They were the lifeblood of a society striving for justice, fairness, and accountability. Crockett's composure illustrated a deeper reality. Courage is not measured by loud declarations or performative gestures, but by the steadfast commitment to truth under pressure. She demonstrated that moral authority arises from action, preparation, and empathy, not from inherited status or carefully curated appearances. In every pause, in every deliberate inflection, she reminded the audience that the power of words is amplified when they are grounded in lived experience. When they carry the weight of principle and the clarity of conscience, the confrontation became a mirror, reflecting the values that many Americans hold dear, yet see challenged every day. It reminded viewers that standing for justice is not just an individual act, it is a ripple that extends outward, influencing communities, shaping discourse, and inspiring participation in civic life. Crockett's example illuminated the courage required in public life, but it also offered a blueprint for personal integrity, to speak truth, to act ethically, and to rise above the noise of entitlement and spectacle. And the inspiration was tangible. Across the country, ordinary citizens felt empowered by her example. Immigrants, women, young leaders, and the marginalized saw a reflection of their struggles in her triumph. They recognized that perseverance, preparation, unwavering commitment to principle can overcome obstacles that seem insurmountable. Her victory became a symbol, a beacon, a call to action that no voice is too small, no life too ordinary, and no background too humble to effect meaningful change. In the cinematic sweep of the confrontation is the American ideals of fairness. Accountability and courage were made real. Crockett's moral high ground was not just a political maneuver. It was a living testament to the values that bind communities, strengthen democracy, and nurture hope. Her words, echoing beyond the room, served as a reminder that true leadership is measured not by titles, wealth, or recognition, but by the courage to stand for what is right when it is hardest. When it matters most, the crescendo came not from spectacle, but from resonance. In the end, Crockett might have reflected, Courage doesn't just speak, reverberates across generations. The audience felt it, a collective exhale of admiration and resolve. Her triumph was not simply over an opponent. It was over cynicism, complacency, and the notion that power can exist without accountability. It was a lesson etched in real time, demonstrating that the choices of today shape the moral landscape of tomorrow. And as the applause faded and cameras clicked one final time, the message remained. Every citizen has the capacity to act with integrity, to challenge injustice, and to uphold the dignity of those around them. Crockett's performance was a reminder that courage is contagious, that speaking truth to power is not just a dramatic act, but a moral imperative, and that the ripple effects of principled action reach far beyond any single moment. It was an affirmation that, in the arc of history, integrity outlasts arrogance, empathy outshines entitlement, and bravery leaves an indelible mark. Asterisk, "You're not wanted" was never just a line. It was a reckoning. A single phrase that cut through arrogance, shattered facades, and reminded the world that courage cannot be inherited, must be earned. In that room, on live cameras, and now across millions of screens, Jasmine Crockett's words became more than a confrontation. They became a symbol, a declaration that integrity, principle, and truth still hold power in a world too often enamored with entitlement. The moral clarity of the moment is undeniable. Courage triumphs over arrogance. Truth rises above privilege, and action rooted in justice outlasts performative appearances. Crockett's composure, her deliberate precision, unwavering moral stance, these were the ingredients that turned a tense confrontation into an inspirational lesson for every viewer. The stakes were not just political. They were profoundly human, reflecting the values that connect communities, sustain democracy, and honor the fight for fairness. If you believe courage should always speak louder than privilege, share this story. Let the world know that integrity matters, that standing for what is right, even when it challenges the powerful, resonates far beyond a single room, single debate, or a single moment in history. Subscribe for more moments where truth triumphs over arrogance, where principles are tested, and where ordinary courage inspires extraordinary change. The final frame lingers. Crockett walking steadily, unshaken, every step measured, confident. The crowd reacts, a mix of awe, applause, and silent recognition. Cameras pan, capturing the ripple of admiration, the subtle smiles, the nods of respect. And as the screen fades to black, the lesson remains. Courage does not whisper, it reverberates. It inspires. It endures.